This is KSQD Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale, K-Squid 89.5, 89.7, 90.7 FM, or online at ksqd.org. From Santa Cruz, California, I'm Gary Shapiro, and this is From the Bookshelf. Thanks so much for joining me. David Thomson returns to the show this week. He is one of the greatest critics and historians of the cinema. His works include the monumental and indispensable A New Biographical Dictionary of Film, The Whole Equation, A History of Hollywood, How to Watch a Movie, Travels in Binge TV, Sleeping with Strangers, all kinds of marvelous books. And he's back with a masterful, deeply reflective new book, A Sudden Flicker of Light, A Revisionist History of the Movies. David, welcome back to From the Bookshelf.
Thank you for having me.
I loved your book, as always, and thank you for writing it. How do you decide what you're going to write next?
Well, I suppose the obvious answer is I asked myself what I'm thinking about, and I had reached a point where I felt the film library is enormous now, and I remember a time when there were hardly any books on film. And the books are about individual filmmakers or periods in film history or studios or one thing or another. And I felt that it was a while since anyone had taken on the whole subject, the history. And I felt that there was a need to really reconsider the history. And in that respect, I was really prompted by the state of the world and the state of America that we're going through. And I had this feeling that grew over the last, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 years, that Donald Trump is a person and a figure and a force that's inconceivable without the media, movie, but screens. And it's not a very nice reflection on the media. And that's how it began. And I talked to an editor, Jonathan Yao at Simon & Schuster, and he liked it and he encouraged it. And I started, and I knew that it was going to be a chronological book, but I also knew that there was no way I could cover everything about film history that could be covered. So I had to choose where I was going to focus and move from. And like a lot of books, I knew the feeling that was prompting the book, but I didn't know the map for the book. I didn't know the path I was going to take, and that it evolved. And there were ups and downs, and some things I wrote and dropped, and then later on augmented in certain places. The same as any book, really. But fundamentally, it was a feeling, having spent my life, certainly from the age of 4, obsessed with film, and having truly loved it, but having grown into a mindset that was more skeptical and more uneasy about everything that had been accomplished, and a little bit troubled by the nature of people, many of them friends that I'd known for decades, who obsessively talked about this film or that film and which film noir was the most effective, honing in on these narrow areas of concentration, but we're talking about the whole thing. And I just felt the whole thing had to be talked about, and at least I had to talk about it. And I can't do a book unless I'm really urgently persuaded that it's a thing I should do. I don't do books casually, and as the world turned, and especially in the last, let's say, 2 years, it came into focus in a very sharp way, and the book ends really with a reflection on where we are in the world now in the broadest sense. So that's really a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, you have written other books that don't talk about whoever was president of the United States at the time that you wrote the book. And I love all the things that you wrote about Donald Trump, and I'm glad that you wrote them. But he kind of comes into focus. He kind of makes little sporadic appearances, but he comes into focus at the end of the book. And I wonder, did you really feel compelled? I mean, there are a lot of film books that don't talk about the president, but this one has a real serious essay about him at the end. You feel compelled to talk about him.
Yes. I think that I think appalling as the man is, the one thing that I think he's unrivaled at, unparalleled at, is a kind of instinctive understanding of how media works and of how vulnerable we are to it, and of how someone can take it over and begin to change the nature of the country. And this is a man who is in, let us say, as he does sometimes say, in the most powerful position in the world. And he spends his time essentially being on camera or watching television. And he boasts about having given up on reading background and reports and data on issues that he might be involved in. He works out of instinct, and that instinct is essentially narcissistic, amazingly vain, and corrupt. And I'm describing something that just a few years ago, 10 years ago, nobody would have believed that was possible, that it could come to take root in America. And the fact of the matter is that in the last 18 months, it has taken root in such a way that our whole growth is compromised and affected by it, I think.
So do you see Donald Trump as somebody that you don't like, or do you see him as someone who is dangerous?
Oh, dangerous.
And where
you doubt that?
Oh no, I agree with you. I just trying to get you to talk. No, I believe he's very dangerous, and I mean I appreciate that you talked about him in the book, because I feel the same compulsion. That's why I'm asking you about it now, because we could be talking about movies, but I want to talk about it. Where do you see the danger?
Oh, I think the danger is that he has already significantly undermined Congress and the Supreme Court. That could be the preparation for a complete coup d'etat. He clearly has people in his administration who are thinking that. I think his nervousness, and I think he's a coward, has held him back from going all the way. But I have serious fears that even this year, in the next 6 months, whatever, he might intervene in the electoral process in such a way that we no longer trusted it. He sort of boasted about the possibility of that. And it may be that some of the people behind him and around him mean it more strongly than he does, because he does have this tendency of making some immense, boastful, sweeping claim of what he's going to do and what he's going to destroy and what he's going to create. And then 2 or 3 days later, he backs off on it. And I think clearly that is a personality type. But I think some of the people around him are more single-minded. And I do not think he's in good shape. I don't think a person of 80 can expect to be in perfect shape. He has immense energy, clearly, and I don't think he sleeps very much. So
only during meetings.
Only during meetings, yes. There's a part of me that sort of is in awe of the way he performs. But I do think that if, let's say, and I speak of this speculatively, and I have no wish for it to happen, but if something happened to him, not something that killed him, but something that clearly diminished his capacity to be president, and the country was then taken over, not just by the vice president, but by the entourage that surrounds them, I'm very scared about what that would lead to. And I think it's very easy to imagine some kind of mounting violence. And I think we've been poised at that point for some time. And I don't know for sure how we're going to get past it. So, I mean, that's my answer to your question. Dangerous, yes.
Well, I appreciate that you took the time in your book to talk about it, because it would be very easy to write a history of film without talking about Donald Trump.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. I want to ask you another question about film. Race is a real issue in older films, and you talk about the racism in Birth of a Nation. And there's so many films that have blackface in them, including Judy Garland and the Marx Brothers, Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire. How do you think people should feel about those films when they watch them?
Oh, I think they should feel horror and shame and an extra renewed determination to make sure that these things do not happen again and are sort of extracted from the American personality. Now, that's not an easy thing to accomplish, and I'm not a Pollyanna about how you go about that, but I do think what's happened in the last few years makes us conscious in ways maybe in the 70s and 80s we weren't, that the introduction of civil rights legislation did not really accomplish the end of racism that we would like to have. And that may just be because it's a very long, slow process, and we have to be patient with it. But who knows whether we have the time to be that patient. I think that increasingly, just in the last few months, the actions against racial improvement that have been made by the government and the courts is terrifying and deeply depressing. And I just don't see any way of saying, oh, well, don't worry, we've got to look on the bright side. We've got to cross our fingers, and we've got to get on, and we've got to try and be progressive. Because, for several decades, this country was fairly progressive, and it made significant improvements in terms of legislation and in terms of how people lived together. And I think you have to face the fact that that process is beginning to be in reverse now. So,
right. I mean, it's like the election of African American presidents
yes,
renewed racism. In the same way that Birth of a Nation renewed interest in the Ku Klux Klan.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the things I do in this book, I'm not saying it's not been said before, but that film buffs tend to say, well, Birth of a Nation, even despite its unfortunate racist elements, Birth of a Nation is wonderful because it was the moment when D.W. Griffith perfected the possibilities in film storytelling language and introduced the world of theatrical film going as a national, international enterprise. And I've treated the film more as the work of Thomas Dixon.
Yeah, you
kind of wrote the novel, the play that inspired
off the hook a little bit.
And I think he's the driving force on the film, and that's a way of saying, don't just be content with how well the film was made. Ask what it is about. And I think that a lot of film commentary for too long has ignored what films are about, what meaning they convey. So all through the book, I'm trying to ask the question, what's it about?
Well, if you're watching a film like, say, Fritz Lang's Return of Frank James with Henry Fonda, remember that one?
I do. I haven't seen it for a very long time, but I do remember it.
He's got a pal who's, I think he's a slave or a former slave, and he's an extremely racist caricature kind of character in it. Or if you're watching a movie and Manton Moreland shows up, I mean, can you still enjoy a film if it has those kinds of depictions in it?
No. I mean, we're into a question like that's very important, which is, do films last forever, or do they date terribly for all manner of reasons? And most films, I think, I don't hold it against them because I think it's in the nature of the business. Most films date pretty fast. And if you're going to watch them again, you have to watch them in the spirit of an historian who's interested. And to take the Frank James film, for instance, there's no way you could get a young audience today to sit still for that film. Not because of the slave character in the film, but just because the storytelling works on a track system that we just don't know anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And the only way you could watch it is you and I could watch it this evening and say, oh, look, you know, you can see how horrible it is. But we have the sort of the point of view of an historian, which is to say, well, I want to know what happened then. And I think that you can watch Birth of a Nation with some value in the sense that you really get a grasp of what 1915 was like, the year the film opened.
Yeah.
But, you know, what I'm saying there would apply to a lot of films. I think even very good films, much better than the Frank James film, for instance, they're hard to watch nowadays. And the fact that we have access to all films, almost all films now, is a wonderful thing. But you can't regain the feeling of the past. And, you know, in a few weeks' time, maybe everyone, in quotes, is going to be lining up to see Odysseus, the Odyssey.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, most of those people may be saying, we were waiting for that. Because I you know, I'm not a Christopher Nolan enthusiast.
Yeah.
And I keep an open mind, I think. But I'm not anticipating a masterpiece.
Well, I saw the preview, which is probably enough for me. But let me ask you about a movie like Honora, which you talk about quite a bit.
Yes.
David Thomson in your new book, A Sudden Flicker of Light, The Revisionist History of the Movies. Do you think that in 20 years, people will look back on that movie and say, wow, that was really exploitive of female sexuality, and in the same way that we look back at Frank James?
I think some people say that even now. I talk in the book about a conversation with my daughter, who is 60 now, so, you know,
yeah.
She's a mature person. She's a university professor in England, and she and I are very close, and she has no compunction about teasing me about sexist attitudes I hold. I don't mean I hold them like a flag, but they're in me.
Show up, yeah.
And you know, she challenged me on Honora and said, you know, Dad, it is pretty exploitative. And she's right. And it would not surprise me at all if in 20 years or even sooner, the estimate of that film goes down a great deal. And I'm lucky in the sense that I don't think I'll be here to be shamed about it. I'm opening up to the possibility that there is shame involved. On the other hand, I would say it is a really fascinating film in this respect, that it starts as what seems like a very raunchy sexual comedy, and it turns into a screwball comedy. It changes its nature during its own course, and it becomes a much more touching film than you expect at the outset. And I like that about it. But you know, my sense of romance, of sex and love was formed at going to the movies. And I'm not alone in that, obviously, but I'm not unaware of Probably that is encouraged, and I think that I think almost all of us, to some degree, certainly of our age anyway, have been screwed up by watching people screw in the movies, and
Yes.
it's another aspect to the feeling I have that we have to keep asking what the films are about and what meanings, what fantasies they're offering to us.
Well, that brings me to Gone with the Wind. So I think Gone with the Wind is about a girl who's in love with a guy who's not in love with her, and then there's another guy that's in love with her, and it's a love story about a little girl who's coming of age, but unfortunately for her, a war breaks out around her. And I think the primary story is the story of Scarlett O'Hara, and that the story of slavery and whatever aspects of slavery in the South and all those things and the lost cause and all those other things, that's not what the film is about. So if you interpret, you said some things about Gone with the Wind as being, you said some mean things about Gone with the Wind. And I think you could, I think Gone with the Wind is wonderful. I still love to watch it. I think if you, somebody said to me, if you pull up the carpet, you'll see the whole floor. But if you pull up just a little piece of the carpet, you only see part of the floor. So I think Gone with the Wind is just looking at this one little thing, and it is not looking at, like, say, the movie 12 Years a Slave is looking at the issue, the horrible issue of slavery.
Right.
So can you separate those things?
Gone with the Wind is such a huge part of my life. I wrote the biography of David O. Selznick, and I spent years on it, and I find that one very difficult to sort of step back from. I saw the film so many times, and I learned so much about it that I became sick of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that happened to me with Citizen Kane for a time. There was a time where I simply told myself, stop watching the damn film. And I spent like 10 years where I didn't see it. And Gone with the Wind, I agree with you entirely. It's about Scarlett O'Hara. And, Scarlett O'Hara is an impetuous, selfish, appealing bitch of a woman. And I think Selznick felt that way about her. I think Selznick knew very little about slavery and the history of the South. He never went to the South during the making of that film. And really, there are a few spectacular scenes like the burning of Atlanta. And he overlooked enormously important things, including, for instance, to be very concrete, when the film opened in Atlanta, and he made it clear that he wanted to bring the family of the film to the city for the world premiere, the mayor of Atlanta, after whom the airport in Atlanta is named, sent a message saying, well, okay, but please don't bring Hattie McDaniel, because that's really not going to go down very well. And to give him credit, Selznick said, what? What do you mean? Protested, but he caved eventually. And Hattie McDaniel did not go to Atlanta. And then on the night of the Oscars for that film, for which Hattie McDaniel won an Oscar, as you, I'm sure, remember, there was a big table at the banquet for the Gone with the Wind people, which included not just the leading figures, but Laurence Olivier and Carole Lombard, people like that. Hattie McDaniel sat with a companion off in a corner of the room at a small table for two. And, when you look at those things now, you're horrified. And people should look at those things. And I would like every showing of Gone with the Wind to include at least a photograph of what the awards banquet was like. Because that's the truth of 1939. And as we were saying earlier, to some extent, still the truth of today. I think that the way things are going, it may become nearly as hard to show and watch Gone with the Wind as it is now Birth of a Nation. A Birth of a Nation, a major event in the history of the medium, you really can't show it these days. Right. You have to make such apologies that it's better not to show it.
I sometimes show my students just the clip of the assassination of President Lincoln, which I think is a really well-made little sequence in that.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay, so another thing about Gone with the Wind, I understand what you're saying, even though none of those things are on screen. So you could see Gone with the Wind without knowing all those things, and it's the movie that it is, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I find interesting about Gone with the Wind is that Vivien Leigh uses a dialect, and it's a good one because she's British. But Leslie Howard, who's also British, uses no dialect and speaks
None
in his
at
own.
all. None at all. And Gable doesn't either.
No,
Gable just refused to try a Southern accent. And you've got very different attitudes to acting there. Vivien Leigh came from a different tradition of acting. She was, by then, deeply involved with Olivier, and I'm sure she learned a great deal from him. And she would do the Southern accent again later on in her career, yes, as you remember, when basically she talked in a kind of South Kensington way. She could have been in the perfume department at Harrods or something like that.
Well, we're talking with David Thomson. His new book is called A Sudden Flicker of Light, A Revisionist History of the Movies. I just saw Disclosure Day the other day, and Emily Blunt, I think, gives a marvelous performance in the film, and she is in dialect the whole time because she's British and is speaking you can't tell she's British at all.
She is super in the film, I thought, and it saves the film because, in my opinion, it's a pretty bad film. And if it didn't have Emily Blunt doing so many different things, she acts in lots of different ways in the film. She's very sincere and direct sometimes. She's very funny and satirical other times. And for me, she made watching it bearable.
I totally concur. So one of the things that you bring up in your book, and that I think about a lot, is that all the movies that you and I have been talking about, including Disclosure Day, are meant to be seen in a theater with at least 300 people around you. I mean, the experience of watching Jaws in the summer of 1975 was a lot different than watching Jaws on your phone in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
The line in The Graduate when he says plastics, it got a huge laugh. Or the line in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner when she says, "Guess who's coming to dinner now?" and she says, "Dr. Martin Luther King," and it got a huge laugh in the theater. Whereas you watch it now, you don't realize that those are jokes. Watching a movie without an audience is a completely different thing. But since 2020, watching a movie with an audience is really something that's gone away.
It was going before then, I think, tell you the truth. But God, yes, I agree totally. I mean, I spent my childhood hoping I'd be able to get in, because I'm talking about going to the movies in South London, where I was born and raised. There were like 3 or 4 theaters within walking distance of where I lived that I would go to. And I don't think any of them held less than 2,000 people. 2,000 people in a theater. And I remember indelibly, one evening, my father and I went to see Rear Window, and we couldn't get in.
There were 2,000
It was
other people
full.
already.
I had to go back another day to see it. And, that was not uncommon in those days because people went regularly. They went almost without knowing what the films were. And as you say, the communal experience, laughing in unison, shuddering in unison, and just being there in the smoke-filled dark, because everyone smoked in the theater in those days, it was crucial. And I think without doubt, in the era of the Depression and then of the war, going to the movies was probably the biggest and best manifestation of we're all in this together that existed. And, I have seen, I'm sure you have, I have been the only person in a theater sometimes.
Yeah. Yes.
And the loneliness of film watching now is a huge issue, I think.
I went to see the Billie Eilish concert movie the other night because it was in 3D, so I had to go to the theater to see it. And and there were 4 other people in the theater, 2 people in a row back over here and 2 other people in a row over there. But they never stopped talking once during the showing of the film because they're used to watching things on their couch where they can talk to each other.
There you are.
I finally turned around and said, "Hey, I am trying to nap here."
Yeah. Well, the other thing is this. A lot of people now don't really watch movies. They watch extracts. They watch part of them.
Yeah.
And I think it's affecting a narrative in a way. Films aren't made with the sense of there being an arc that you want to follow all the way through. They're broken down into segments already, and it makes us all sound very old and funny-duddy to be saying these things, yes. but I believe them nonetheless. And the group experience of watching, very important in my life.
Well, you and I talked last time, I think it was, about television. You wrote a wonderful book about television. And, it was a time when everybody watched the same thing at the same time and then talked about it the next day. Everybody watched Roots and everybody talked about it, or The Fugitive or whatever it was. Whereas now that's true with television, too. People are watching it on their own time, in their own space, in their own room with their headphones on. It's not a shared experience either.
Yes.
I don't know what it's doing to us, but it's interesting to note that we don't do things as a group like we used to.
Well, I think what it's doing to us is institutionalizing aloneness, which isn't the same as loneliness. There's a kind of pathos in loneliness. Aloneness is almost mathematical. We're separate units, digits, and I think that there are frightening ways in which the whole climate of humanism, the notion that we are all in this together, and that if we can join together, then we have a better chance, as well as having a better understanding of how other people feel. I think that is in retreat. And for me, one of the most frightening things about AI is the notion that it will prepare the way for a society in which people no longer have the humanist values. So they don't feel a loss. They don't feel threatened. They become more like body snatched people, if you think. I very much like Invasion of the Body Snatchers as a sort of metaphor. And the first version is from the 50s, and then there's one in the 70s. But that idea of something happening that takes away the potential or the wish for interaction among people, I'm very scared of that building.
So in a way, the road that led us to Donald Trump, has to do with this sort of failure of group dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd said group dynamics, Mom, to my mother about going to the theater, she would have said, "What?" The language is different, but sitting next to strangers, which is really a big part of going to the movies in the days we're talking about, that meant a lot.
Yeah. So another thing that's happening, I think, in movies, despite what we've been saying about how people watch just segments and don't want to sit still for a whole movie, movies are much longer now than they used to be. The 88-minute movie was perfect.
Aren't they ever? Yes.
But even in your praise of Honora, you mentioned in the book that it's too long. I mean, Gone with the Wind is long, and so is The Godfather Part 2, but they are as long as they need to be, whereas I feel a lot of movies, like the movie we were just talking about with Emily Blunt.
Yes.
It's
Disclosure Day.
Disclosure Day is easily 25 minutes too long.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because at the same time, the business keeps talking and trying to tell itself that it believes in getting that extra screening a day in, but they keep making movies that make that less and less likely.
Yeah.
I think it's unfailing that movies are too long now, and I don't know. I mean, I think that actors are indulged, sound people are indulged, everything on a movie is indulged. Whereas once upon a time, there was an imperative: make it quicker, move it quicker, and sometimes when you see pictures from the 1940s, which I think was a golden age, they move so fast. It's like being in a fast car, and there's an exhilaration from it, just the speed and the feeling of an engine taking you along. Yeah, it's shocking.
A lot of my film students, I teach film appreciation at Monterey Peninsula College. A lot of my film students, when they see a film like Casablanca, which moves at a very fast pace,
yes,
I think it's it's under 2 hours, it's 110 minutes or something.
Yeah,
it's dialogue driven. And from the very beginning of the movie, stuff is happening.
Yes.
And they can't follow it. Stagecoach is another good example. There's a lot of things that happen in Stagecoach in the very beginning when we meet.
When all the people are introduced.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's things about them that you need to know without them saying. Claire Trevor's character is a prostitute, but they don't call her that. But she's wearing clothes that are different than the clothes that the other ladies are wearing. And Doc Boone is a drunk, and they don't exactly say that, but he's drinking constantly. So, the picking up of clues, visual clues, is very difficult for students. Now, one of my students said after watching The Searchers, like in the first 10 minutes of the movie, like nothing happens. And like so much happens, but it's done visually. They don't pick up.
Well, I mean, undoubtedly there is a way in which young people today, not only young people, but young people don't know how to watch movies. And watching movies is a habit. And once upon a time, people went maybe twice a week, and they knew how movies worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were respectful of and admiring of things that they couldn't articulate, couldn't even talk about, but they knew how a scene worked. And sometimes in old movies, there's a definite longueur. There's a 5-minute scene where you know they should have cut that. And you know it because you're so used to the pace that if it drops, if a film suddenly lapses into small talk, if you know what I mean, instead of direct, meaningful talk, people pick up on it straight away. Or they did in the old days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you talked about your book about Selznick and thinking of Gone with the Wind or any of the films that Selznick made, I mean, he really was like a hands-on, frame-by-frame kind of producer. He was much more the auteur than the director would have been, right? I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, Alfred Hitchcock would have said, "My God, is he a hands-on producer?" And I hate him because of it. And they had a war on a film that turned out to win the Best Picture Oscar, Rebecca. But yes, I mean, Selznick loved filmmaking, and I think that I think the moguls of the old days, they had done a little bit of it themselves, and they understood how a film worked. The Scott Fitzgerald novel, The Last Tycoon, unfinished book, an imperfect book, but it has that great chapter where it just observes Monroe Starr, who was based more or less on Irving Thalberg, in a day in the life of, and he just solves problem after problem after problem. And at a managerial level, it's breathtaking, and you're cheering him along. And the real moguls were a bit like that, I think. I admire that, and I think that the industry is without those people now. Businessmen are trying to run it, and it's like any performing art. You have to be very close to performing yourself, I think. And I think most of the people in the old film business actually began wanting to be actors.
Yeah. Well, or they were actors. John Ford was an actor.
That's right. Yeah.
And Robert Redford, who won his only Academy Award as a director,
That's right. Yeah.
I saw a movie the other day that was directed by Edmund O'Brien.
Oh, yeah.
The actor. He wasn't a very good director. Lionel Barrymore directed as well.
Yeah, well, it still goes on.
I think probably every actor thinks they could direct, maybe.
Yeah, but everyone sort of says Clint Eastwood is a wonderful director.
Oh, he is.
I think he's a wonderful producer. I think that actually making the film bored him a bit, and he's famous for doing it in one take whenever he could, but he's a very effective actor director. But I think is essentially because he has had the mind of a producer, and I do not say that critically or pejoratively. I think great producers are very important in the business.
Did you think Jerry Lewis was a good film director?
Yeah, I think there was a period when Jerry Lewis was a remarkable director, and certainly, as I'm sure you know, he thought deeply about what directing was, and he wrote a book about it, and it's an interesting book. I've never been as big a fan of his comedy as some people are. Although I'm bound to say, I saw him once perform live, and he was incredible.
Oh, you saw him in a nightclub situation?
Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really amazing.
I saw him on the stage in London doing Damn Yankees, and he was quite.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, what I saw was unscripted. He was clearly making it up as he went along, you know, and I think probably that was his true métier.
Well, I'm sure.
When I first came to America, I arrived just before the Labor Day weekend. And the first thing I saw on American television was the telephone, which I'd heard about from England. And I could not believe how appalling and absolutely compelling it was.
Well, it is interesting how sometimes performers, directors, they last so long that they do themselves a disservice. You know, like Bob Hope. You know, some of Bob Hope's early comedies are marvelous, but I think a lot of people my age remember him, you know, walking through his terrible television specials.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely agree. His film career is really interesting. Yeah, yeah.
I want to ask you about silent films. You talk about the coming of sound in a very positive way, like it had to happen, and it's so much better that it happened. Does that mean you're not a fan of the silent cinema?
I mean, not in the way that the people who go to the silent film festival here in San Francisco are. I love the talk. When movies start talking, sort of 1932-3 onwards, I love what happens. I love the way acting suddenly has to become smarter and quicker. And I think the feelings and the emotions in the films get deeper at the same time. So, I mean, I'm very fond of and respectful of a lot of silent cinema. But I do believe the medium came of age with sound. Yeah. And I'm friendly with Walter Murch, and he's helped me see or hear particularly some of the depths and the intricacies that sound can bring to the atmosphere of a film. And I find myself increasingly interested in what sound does. But I'm bound to say also, I'm a child of radio. I was spending longer listening to radio when I was a kid than I was watching films. I listened all the time. And there was a lot of drama on BBC radio and the sound effects, the music, you know, and learned a lot from that.
I'm a fan of radio, and we're on the radio right now. But one of the things I love about radio drama, I like to listen to episodes of Gunsmoke a lot, which is far superior to the television version of Gunsmoke, which was also very good. But when you watch Gunsmoke on TV, you're sitting over here and Gunsmoke is over there. But when you're listening to it on the radio, you're in it. It's all around your head.
That's the thing about radio, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Totally agree.
It's more realistic than the movies.
Yeah.
In a way.
I would far rather listen to baseball on the radio than watch it on television, funnily enough, you know. One of my great pleasures is driving home late at night from some trip, listening to the ball commentary and adore it.
All right, I love that too. Are you're a baseball fan?
Yeah, I mean, when I came to America, my life changed in lots of ways. One of them was that I had to learn 3 new sports. I was crazy about British sports, and I'm thoroughly into the World Cup now.
Huh.
But I really didn't know American football. I didn't know baseball. I had seen basketball played, but basketball in Britain in those days was not the game that was played over here. And I've had to, I don't say had to in the sense that it was imposed on me. I've had the opportunity to learn how to watch those games and listen to them. And big part of my life, big part.
Well, you said that you watch at least part of a couple of movies every day, and you recommend a lot of marvelous books in your new book, and I appreciate that. And I wonder, you've written, basically a book every every year or every 6 months, or so you have a new book. How do you have time to watch movies, read books, and write books? It doesn't make sense. You must have a team.
I lead an incredibly plain, concentrated life. I discovered, I don't know how long ago, but let's say 30 years ago, I discovered the kinds of upset and anxiety and unease and depression and all those bad things that we all suffer from to some degree. The only thing that really helped me to get through them was to compose. Composing for me is at the keyboard and you're composing something, but I'm composing my inner being with it. So I write as much as I do. Some people tell me I write a great deal. Some people tell me I write too much.
Not enough.
But
I'd say not enough.
I do it because it's for me, it's a habit like breathing, really it comes to that level. And I feel very lucky at my age that I'm still able to write. And I think I write as well as I ever have done, which isn't to say I'm correct in that. Other people may say, oh, don't kid yourself.
Well, I've been reading you for years, and I think A Sudden Flicker of Light, A Revisionist History of the Movies, is as great as anything you've ever written, and thank you for writing it. I think
Well, thank you for saying that. I feel that way about the book, too. I felt as I was doing it, certainly towards the end, that this was getting somewhere I'd never been.
Well, it's a brave book also, especially because you've spent so much time talking about politics, and it would have been easy to not do that. So, yeah. David Thomson, again, thank you for writing the book, and thank you so much for spending some time with us on From the Bookshelf. I hope you'll come back.
It's wonderful to talk to you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
That's it for this week's From the Bookshelf. I hope you enjoyed the program, and will come back and see us again next time. I'm Gary Shapiro. Take care. See you soon.